John Chafee at that time was a state representative from Warwick, and he was also a member of the Ninth Ward Republican Committee. So my association with him basically was meeting and talking to him at the full city committee meetings, generally once a month. But other than that, I did not know much about him. I knew that he was a minority leader in the House, but as it is today, there were very few Republicans in the House at that time, even though Warwick was a strong Republican community.
So how did this all come about? Set the scene. What was the situation that you were looking for? It was an election year, but tell me about
It was election for governor, and John Nardi was the incumbent Democratic governor, very popular, but had made a few mistakes, and everybody talked, particularly the press said, this may be the year that a Republican can recapture the governorship. And the first candidate to announce was John Chafee, and also announcing shortly after was Louis Jack Voney. Now, the Jack Voney family had been in Rhode Island politics for many, many years. A Republican family. His father was Attorney General for at least 4 years, and he was well known, particularly in Providence and Pawtucket and the northern part of the state. John Chafee announced, and he kind of used his minority leadership in the House as the reason that he would like to run for governor. I knew Louis Jack Voney very well. He was in the Providence Young Republicans with me. I knew some of his brothers. So I basically knew him much better than I knew John Chafee. No other candidates announced, so it basically came down to Jack Voney versus Chafee. And neither one gave any ground as to dropping out of the race, so a primary was necessary to find a candidate. Well, what happened really was each town committee and city committee endorsed a candidate. Well, the majority of the towns and cities endorsed Jack Voney because they knew very little about John Chafee. The Warwick City Committee endorsed John Chafee as the local boy. Well, that put me kind of in a pickle, because although I was not obligated by that vote in any way, I felt I'm a member of the Warwick City Committee, and the Warwick City Committee has endorsed John Chafee. Should I be bound by that vote? I knew I wasn't legally bound by it, but the majority of the people in the city committee wanted John Chafee. Then the whining and dining portion came along. John Chafee wined and dined me, looking for my vote. They wined and dined Mom. Louis Jack Voney wined and dined us. So it it went back and forth, and I got phone calls and letters and calls from Chafee, calls from Jack Voney, because the word got around, and I don't know why, but the word got around with the hierarchy in the Republican Party that
Hold on a second. Okay, start with the word got around.
the word got around that 99% of the delegates, there was two of us from Warwick, myself and Millie Anderson, 99% of the delegates had declared one way or another. I never declared my preference, nor did Millie Anderson. And Millie Anderson told me, Don, I'm going to vote whatever you tell me, I'm going to vote that way. But the word got around that there were maybe 6 candidates that had not declared, and the final vote was going to come down to those 6 candidates, and it probably wouldn't be known until a roll call was taken. So the night of the endorsement came along, and I had not made up my mind. I went back and forth in my mind. I thought truly that because of the name Jack Voney was a stronger statewide name than John Chafee. But on the other hand, I'd gotten to know Chafee very well through this endorsement period. And again, I always hark back to the vote taken by the Warwick City Committee. Their preference was John Chafee. Again, I wasn't bound by that vote, but I said, gee, I might have a moral obligation to follow that endorsement, whether I liked it or not. I represent Warwick. Warwick has endorsed Chafee, and I should go with Chafee. I went with Millie to the convention. On the way, Millie and I talked about it, and I said, Millie, I honestly don't know who I'm going to vote for. She said, well, as I told you, whoever you vote for, I vote for. And then we started adding up the numbers, and on a mock poll taken before the actual roll call, it was neck and neck. John Chafee was behind by 2 votes, and that would have been of counting my vote and Millie's vote. Well, the roll call came along, and of course Warwick was down at the bottom with W, and I just kept thinking over and over again, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I wanted the strongest candidate, and I still felt at that point that Jack Voney was the strongest candidate. But when they called Warwick, I was to announce the vote, and before I got up, I said to myself, you have a moral obligation to vote for John Chafee. He's from Warwick. He's been endorsed by the body that you represent, and your moral vote should be for him. So I got up and I said, Warwick cast 2 votes for John Chafee. And then they took, and I think you had to have at that time a majority of 8 votes to win the endorsement, and Louis Jack Voney had 6. And if I'd have gone with him and Millie had gone with him, he'd have won it on the first ballot. The second ballot roll call was taken, and one other candidate was nominated from the floor, and he had 2 votes, and on the second ballot he swung it to Chafee, but still no one had the 8 votes. Jack Voney had dropped down to at that point I think 4, and on the second ballot people were switching. I stuck and Millie stuck with John Chafee. On the third vote, some independents that were with Jack Voney, 2 switched over to Chafee, and he won by 2 votes. I don't say this in bragging in any sense of the word, but in my eyes, my vote and Millie's votes sticking with him started him on his political career.
What caused the other people to move away from Jack?
Jack Voney's, if I can remember now, because it was a long time ago, but I think Jack Voney's people came around making promises to some of the vulnerable Chafee votes. There were some people in there that voted for John Chafee, but they could have easily been swayed by a promise of a job or something. And you had 2 different type of candidates. John Chafee was as naive and as the farthest thing from a backroom politician that you could ever get. Louis Jack Voney was brought up in Providence politics, backroom deals, promise them anything to get their vote. I'm not talking about him personally, but I'm talking about the people that were associated with him. And some of those went around and tried to, and apparently bought off some of the Chafee votes with promises of job. John Chafee didn't promise anybody anything.
What did they promise you, the others?
I think he said I would have a shot for banking commissioner, that he would look very favorably upon me for banking commissioner, which was an appointee of the governor.
Was that him in particular who made that promise, or one of his men?
One of his men.
In the article that Chafee matured during the campaign, how did Chafee mature?
We taught him how to shake hands, would stick out his hand to somebody and say, "Hi, I'm John Chafee. I'm running for governor, and I appreciate your vote." He never knew how to do that when he first campaigned. He was shy. He wouldn't go into the big supermarkets. He wouldn't go into Ann and Hope. He'd back away. We literally corralled him into going to these big department stores and going in and finding someone and going up to him and say, again, "I'm John Chafee. I'd like your vote. I'm running for governor." And he did it, and he just matured during that campaign. I could see the difference. He was not that shy. Uh, Candidate that figured that if he smiled at you and just said hi, that you were going to give him your vote. You had to go up and tell him who you are and what you're running for, and you'd like his vote. And even if you shook 10 Democratic hands, you might get one or two of them. And he learned to do that very successfully.
What did you learn in Providence politics that helped you know what to tell Jake?
Just basically that you had to make a lot of noise. You had to make your presence felt in rallies, in places that you were looking for votes. You had to listen to people complain. You had to show yourself as a professional, that you weren't just talking out of both sides of your mouth, and not make promises that you couldn't keep.
It was fun, and I got quite friendly with Ginny Chafee, and where we both had families about the same size. We used to talk about the kids and whatnot, and I enjoyed it. But so when he got elected, the first thing he did was ask me to be in his office, which I accepted on a part-time basis because I was already retired.
His correspondence.
I used to do all his correspondence, all his letters, and occasionally he'd ask my opinion on things, and I used to let him know if I felt he was way off base on something. And he used to call me his devil's advocate. But we got along fine, and I really enjoyed working there. And for the most part, he had a very nice crew working with him. And that's about it.
You enjoyed many occasions with John Chafee too.
Yeah, but I didn't work that much with John Chafee. But I enjoyed meeting interesting people, and usually when he had a gathering or it was a special occasion, he asked me to be hostess. And at fundraisers, Dad and I were always at the door collecting money and greeting people. Sometimes it was difficult because
A lot of famous people.
You shut up. Sometimes it was difficult because I had trouble remembering names, but Dad was good with them.
A lot
And
of famous people.
so you said, will you shut up? And we got to meet a lot of interesting, famous people. And that's about it.
You were working at the door well into your 70s.
Yeah. In fact, all through his campaign, when he moved on, I didn't care to go with him, and I didn't care to stay with the incumbent particularly. I wanted to retire and just sit back and enjoy life.
What was it like working in politics all those years?
Some of it was fun, some of it was frustrating. learned a lot. We met a lot of nice people. I don't know what it was for your father.
Well, like Mom said, it was a lot of fun. Frustrating a lot of the times because we didn't win. We won early in the 50s, but from the 60s on, we didn't win many elections. But we had fun. We, again, met so many nice people, had so many friends, attended many banquets, fundraisers. We saw national people come in here. We enjoyed seeing Nelson Rockefeller on many occasions. We saw Ronald Reagan. Big names like that really was a thrill.
Another thing, I mean, we didn't have a lot of money, and we had a reasonably large family, so it was, and most things we got free tickets to, so it was a nice way to have a good time without it costing us much.
Tell me about the time somebody suggested you run for mayor.
Well, yeah, there was one time, I guess no Republican candidate had announced, and in those days it was a no-no just to leave an office unopposed. Nowadays, uncontested, unopposed. Nowadays, there's so many of them that run unopposed, but they looked around and they thought that I would fit the bill. I was a banker. I knew a lot of people. A lot of people knew me. Hopefully, I was well respected. Had a nice family, so I kind of fit the image. And they approached me and asked if I would consider running for mayor. Well, I didn't say no right away. I said, well, I'm not prepared to say yes or no now. I said that would be a big sacrifice for me and my family. I said I enjoy being behind the scenes. Being mayor would be a whole new, different ball game for me. But I tossed around the idea, and I don't remember who. It probably was Noel, who was practically unbeatable. Well, whatever. I tossed it around, and I said no. And then I kind of hinted to my bosses at the bank that they've asked me, and they said, well, it's either politics or the banking, and you're going to have to give up your job. And then I said, no, that's too much of a risk. So I just told them, thanks, but no thanks.